Welcome, everyone. We still have people coming in, so maybe while we're waiting, if you want to put in the chat where you're zooming in from, just so we know where everyone's coming from.
Hmm. Chat. Let's see. Whatever. Chat. Chat.
And then maybe mute yourself if you're not muted already. I think if there's someone calling in on the phone, and you probably won't have a chat on your phone. And we're just going to give it another minute or two as we have people still coming in. And for those of you who just joined, we're just putting in our chat where we're calling in from. So we've got people coming in from Vermont and Buffalo, New York, Wyoming, the traditional lands of the Northern Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Eastern Shoshone. I am coming in from Honolulu, Hawaii, and Mike from El Paso, Texas, and we've got Mark from Olympia, Washington. Welcome, everyone. If you can put your name and or where you're calling in from in the chat or where you're zooming in from, we would love to see where everyone's coming in from. And then I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. My name is Liz Kaczynski, and I'm the executive director of Radical Joy for Hard Times, and otherwise known as Rad Joy. We call ourselves Rad Joy. We're very excited to welcome you, both those of you who are attending with us live today, as well as those of you who are watching our recording sometime in the future. Welcome to our Earth Exchange Cafe. So we've been on quite a hiatus due to the transition of our organization, which was led by our founder, Trebby Johnson, for almost the entire duration of our existence. And then I became the executive director at the beginning of this year when Trebby stepped down in her role. She's still part of our organization. I was introduced to Radical Joy myself when I was attending Naropa University, where I was studying eco-psychology. And I was very impressed with the organization. I became a board member in about 2018, I think. I'm very, very passionate about the work that we do. For those of you who are new to our organization, we became a 501c3 in 2010. And our mission is to deeply connect with natural places that have been damaged or wounded through human or natural acts. We encourage people to spend time in wounded places. We expose our hearts to the difficult feelings of loss and guilt of what we have done to the world or what has happened to the earth. Listen to the land and to one another, and we open ourselves to the possibilities for finding and creating beauty in these places. As an organization, we've been hosting an annual event called the Global Earth Exchange since our very beginning. And usually we hold the Global Earth Exchange around the solstice, and people across the entire globe have participated. I think we've had people participate from every continent. And in this practice, we choose a place to go that we consider wounded, and it's a very vast array of places. It can be prisons, hospitals, damaged forests, polluted streams, the whole gamut. And when we do the practice, we go and be with the place, we listen to the land, share stories, and then we create art as a gift of reciprocity to the places that we love. We've also, as an organization, we host the Earth Exchange Cafe, which was formerly hosted by Trebi and our former board member Harriet Sams. They held a monthly online conversation with artists, writers, educators, scientists, other change makers, those whose work inspires that of radical joy for hard times. And in those conversations, we explore the kinds of deep questions that trouble and fascinate so many of us in this time of challenge. You can find recordings of our past Earth Exchange cafes on our website. We've had people like well-known psychotherapist and author Francis Weller, writer Carl Safina, scientist and writer Carl Safina, other notable guests. We can put the chat in the link so that you can see the archive of presentations or exchanges that we've had. And so here we are today, or in some future time for those of you who are listening to the recording. We are gathered in our Earth Exchange Cafe. So you might take a moment, if it feels comfortable, you can close your eyes and just visualize us together, sitting in community. Maybe you're sipping tea or coffee, and bringing into your awareness all of those people that are here today or sometime in the future, those who are listening in the future, and bringing into your awareness all the places that we are in physically, and the places that we love that are wounded, just weaving a web of connection through the internet. And just maybe visualizing the environment that you're in this little cafe, maybe a fire burning in the corner, and we're all sitting together. And in this Earth Exchange Cafe today, I am going to be your host along with Andrea, who is she'll probably introduce herself briefly, but she is a board member as well. And Mike is going to share his stories, and then there is going to be time for questions or comments. So Andrea, did you want to just say a word, just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Aloha, everyone. Wow, it's so great to see you all. I feel like we need community and connection more than ever right now, and I'm personally very grateful for this beautiful space. I'm with the band, the Rajoy Band, new this year, and it's been a wonderful journey. And yeah, I love place and connection and tending to the wounded. So this is wonderful to be here. Thank you.
And I will just say that our board member calls ourselves the band. So Andrea is one of our board members. we that's kind of an affectionate name we call ourselves. So before we get started with Mike, I wanted to just take a moment to start with a grounding practice. So just getting yourself in a really comfortable posture. You can even lay down if that feels better. And closing your eyes if that feels comfortable. And just taking a pause. So there's so much going on in the world right now, in this country, in the United States, other places in the world. In some of our own lives, we're having a lot of turmoil and challenges. So let's just take a moment to acknowledge the challenges that we face as a global community. And one of the things that I think we can do to sustain ourselves during the very challenging times is to come together in community, to hear stories, to connect with our humanity. Just taking a moment to just check in with your heart, letting your heart soften if you need to. Just taking a moment to just connect with everyone who is on this call right now and everyone who will be watching in the future. And perhaps taking a moment to connect with your intention for being here today. Perhaps just a sense of curiosity, desire to be in community. Whatever that happens to be, perhaps there's multiple intentions for being present today. or in some point in the future if you're watching the recording. Just taking a moment to arrive in the present moment, noticing the sounds that you're hearing, any sensations that you're feeling in your body. Maybe a gentle breeze brushing across the skin, sense of coolness or warmth. Just connecting with your breath and remembering that we are all breathing together in this moment. The breath connecting us across the world, connecting us with the plants, the oceans that provide us the oxygen that we breathe, gives us life. And if your eyes are closed, you can start to slowly open them. And I will, with great honor, introduce you to our speaker, Mike Novotny. We want to welcome Mike into the Radical Joy community. He is a new board member we're very excited to have on board. But we also want to thank Mike and welcome him for the service that he has given to our country in the United States as an Army veteran. And I'm just going to share a little bit about Mike before he begins and hand it over to him. So Mike is a transdisciplinary artist, speaker. He's a PhD candidate and a US Army veteran. He's deeply passionate about creative expression and using art to tell story. His work is intended to be a vessel that carries stories of warriorhood, human becoming, and the desire to connect with what lies beyond the human domain. Mike integrates knowledge and practices rooted in spiritual traditions, science, philosophy, mythology, and psychology. Terrapsychology, which might be a new word for some of you, is one of the primary disciplines that influence his artistic process. And this discipline of terrapsychology helps him illuminate, animate, and honor the ideas of interconnectedness. When he's not in his studio, he aspires to help others bring conscious awareness to their own creativity and ceremonial becoming process. And he does so by facilitating the soulful exploration of visionary and regenerative practices. In my opinion, Mike is the embodiment of radical joy, and I am very happy to turn it over to you now, Mike, and thank you for your presence and being here today.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to the Radical Joy team and to everyone who is logged on today. I'm really excited to be here and to share some of my thoughts and reflections about the transformative power of pilgrimage, some of my approaches to being with military places, and also talk a little bit about warriorship. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see okay. All right. And yeah, I'll just say that warriorship is really at the heart of this research pilgrimage project that I just went on. And you know, within warriorship, I'm constantly asking this idea, the question of what does it mean to be a warrior? And also what can the warrior become? Something that I will say, a person that has really inspired me over these years has been Bob Ross. And I don't know if you all are familiar with him. Maybe some of you remember him from the 80s and 90s. and his lovely show, The Joy of Painting. It's something I talk about in my book is that, Bob Ross had 20 years of service in the United States military, and he retired in the rank of Master Sergeant. And believe it or not, his nickname was Beat 'em Up Bobby when he was in the Air Force. So, isn't it wonderful who we can become, right? Um, I feel like Bob is a kindred spirit to me, and I certainly can relate as an artist and yeah, someone who's been on the warrior journey myself. Um, yeah, I served most of my adult life in the United States military and had this interesting time trying to hold space for the ideas of American warriorship and also being an artist. I feel like in a lot of ways, being a warrior it became somewhat of a case study. And art was this way of getting into the weeds of it. And, as you can see there in this photograph to the right with this work that I had done, you can see the soldier who's actually a friend of mine who allowed me to use his image. And, you can see he's wrapped in this flag and he's got the gold chains around the neck and wearing half of a gas mask, and in that gas mask, you can see coming out of that the lens, there's a reflection of war. And then on the other side, there's his face and he's wearing sunglasses with the reflection of Las Vegas lights. And the thing I love about art and how healing it's been for me is that it allows me to really show many different truths at once. And, of course, for the warrior, there's a lot of reconciliation, especially for, the post 9/11 warrior and the things that have happened over the last couple of decades. And so, it invites this question of, how do we come home when there's so much, that we now have perhaps on our minds and so many things that we've experienced, but yet we're also trying to live a normal life. And believe it or not, too, this idea of warriorship for me started, and this exploration of warriorship started way before I even joined the military. Something I've been coming home to, as I return this whole pilgrimage process, is the fact that, I grew up in warrior tradition. I like to say that I was born into it. My initiation started before I was even born, and started with my father, who was born in the 1950s as a mixed race man living on the south side of Chicago. And so talk about a place of hardship and trying to find a sense of belonging. And so, my father, he found martial arts to be that place for him where he could feel a sense of empowerment and learn how to survive his own upbringing. And so fast forward to when I come into the world, and by the time I can walk, I'm in a dojo with my father, who's third degree black belt. And so that tradition for me lasted up until I joined the military. And the thing with that, what I'm as a researcher and really unpacking who I am as a person, what I'm loving about coming home to this idea of warriorship is that, especially within the martial arts culture, I'm finding some beautiful, beautiful insights into these other worlds that I don't know, maybe perhaps overlooked a little bit in my younger years, but in the style of karate that we participated in, Shotokan, it actually has many foundations within Buddhist traditions. And I remember going to the dojo probably 4 or 5 days a week, and every time before we even started throwing any kind of punches or kicks, we would always recite this maxim of, the ultimate good lies not in winning 1,000 battles, but in avoiding conflict. And yeah, that was something that really has always stuck to me. I remember it to this day. I cannot forget that. And it's interesting now how some of these ideas that I learned earlier on in warriorship somehow didn't really match up with some of the ideas that I was taught within the American warrior culture. And that's okay. I feel like more than anything, it's allowed me to now step back and really question what is it? What is this whole warrior thing about? In doing so, especially these last few years, since I've taken off the military uniform, I've really embraced this more expansive understanding of what the warrior is, and of course, if you're familiar with archetypes, and there's the warrior archetype, and it sort of lives on in all of us, right? Just to varying degrees. And so for me at this point, again, it's like, how do I answer the question of, well, what am I, really a warrior for now? And I think that that's something that, we can all perhaps ask ourselves in some way. And I think it's about reclaiming that word sometimes, in a world where we live, where it's, the idea of warrior is something that we associate with someone wearing a uniform or carrying a weapon, but, it's much bigger than that. It certainly feels much more expansive for me. You have people out here in the world who are warriors for their elderly parents. There are many of us who are out here being warriors for our children. And so I just offer that, to everyone before I really go into talking about my pilgrimage and, the embodied return of the warrior. And so when I exited the military in 2022, I found this lovely school called Southwestern College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they had just stood up a doctoral program called Visionary Practice and Regenerative Leadership. And I said, oh, what is that? Like, never heard of it. And keep in mind, I've just come from this warrior culture where I had learned about leadership in all kinds of ways. Went to warrior leader course, advanced leader course, senior leader course, master leader course. And so all of a sudden I'm now hearing like this, what is regenerative leadership about? So for the next 3 years, this amazing school had given me plenty of tools and ideas about what it means to be a regenerative leader, to understand, perhaps even diagnosing whole person and whole system issues, and dreaming into designing and delivering solutions. And they encourage us to cultivate some vision along the way too. And so for me, by the time I got to this research phase, I had this idea of, what, I need to go on a pilgrimage, one that one honors this journey that I've been on, this long warrior journey, but then also too considers the land that has supported me for so many years on that journey. And so for my pilgrimage, the way that I planned it was I ended up mapping out 6 different military bases within the middle of our country that I had either lived or trained at, and really significant places that have had an impact on me. And it just so happened that, it was right sort of in this area where I could draw a geographical circle. And I said, yeah, let's do it. It's 2,800 miles, and it took me, I was on the road for about 40 days, spending about 6 to 7 days at each location, either sometimes on the base and also off the base. And it's important for me to point out the word return. And you can see that I have it hyphenated up there at the top, but it's important to really define what that means for a pilgrimage like this. And I didn't really have to define it myself. I actually found there's a physicist, Karen Barad, who wrote in her article, Diffracting Diffraction, and she explains it very nicely. She says, we might imagine returning as a multiplicity of processes, such as the kinds earthworms revel in, while helping to make compost or otherwise being busy at work and at play, turning the soil over and over, ingesting and excreting it, tunneling through it, burrowing, all means of aerating the soil, allowing oxygen in, opening it up and breathing new life into it. And that is, to me, the perfect definition of what I was going to do artistically, going back to these military places. And of course, you know, you don't embark on a journey like this without also having some tools in the toolbox, as they say. And not to get too, you know, academically wordy or anything, but I feel like it is very much important to point out these methodologies, as we call them, and really it's simply like your framework, right? Like, how am I going to accomplish this thing, you know, framed within certain ideas? And so, parapsychology, which Liz had pointed out, was really a primary central methodology for me, which really allowed me to explore how objects and places, you know, that we encounter sort of resurface within us, within our psyche in some way. And, you know, I think that that's really important. I think as an example, we might ask, you know, why some writers feel the need to be near rivers when they create, right? This idea of creating that flow somehow is able to help them write. And within parapsychology, it's wonderful because it also helps you dream into how we would creatively animate and engage with places, to see them beyond just these, you know, sort of unalive objects and things. And so, yeah, parapsychology was really wonderful. But then also there was this idea of including, you know, autoethnography. And I think parapsychology really makes a lot of room for other frameworks. And so autoethnography was important because it helped me really construct meaning and really situate myself, my own story, you know, within the context of the American military and that culture, but then also to think about, you know, this pilgrimage for me. I'm a person of color traveling in the middle of America right now. And to be honest, you know, there's some degree of fear around that. Fear that I had to work through, talk through, things like that. And so autoethnography really helped me just be a little bit more comfortable in talking about some of those things. And then arts-based research, which clearly as an artist, that feels like a no-brainer, right? Like I'm going out into this world and I'm going to figure out what's happening. And I'm not just going to write about it. I'm going to create art around it. And for me, art has always said so much more than I ever could on a piece of paper. So, and that really helps, you know, art-based research, autoethnography, you know, all of this really gave me a better understanding of how I was going to go about doing self-tracking and this whole journey, you know, through reflective writing, through memo recordings on my phone, self-interviews, sketches, photographs, all of those things. And as I went along on my journey, I'm out and about, there was really some approaches to place field engagement that started to come out for me. One of those I call sandwiching. And sandwiching is simply where, you know, of course, when we're engaging with places that we might feel challenged by or challenging to sort of interact with, might need a little bit of help. And so what stuck out to me from the very beginning of the pilgrimage, from the first place that I arrived to, which was Fort Carson, Colorado, was that it helped to engage with the land in a way that felt perhaps a little, you know, healing, inviting, strengthening, and then make my way into the military bases or in and around those places. And, you know, at each destination, each place field that I was at, maybe perhaps I'd spend 1 to 2 days being with the land, then slowly find a way to sort of integrate connecting with bases. And then I would typically spend another couple of days reconnecting with the land. And that was just one of my approaches to engaging. The other one is what I call squatching. And this was born out of the fact that at everywhere I went, one of the fascinating, fun things, motifs that stood out to me was Sasquatch. Sasquatch was this mythical ally that really was showing me at every place, every state, something new. From Colorado to Kansas, Missouri, just all the way through, I would find Sasquatch being boundaryless and full of strength, both hiding and seeking, and walking rather softly, Bigfoot, but soft in nature. And that helped me to really dream into like how I'm interacting going into places. And so for me, as I engaged with any place, whether on base or off, I slowly began to just, before I entered straight through right to where I wanted to go and did my thing, like it was about really subtly walking around in a way, walking around the perimeter, just being with that place in the softest way, maybe even going from tree to tree, embodying the Sasquatch. And then eventually, as I'm going in, of course, I'm listening to the place as well, and perhaps even seeking permission in some ways, asking, is it okay to enter, to come in even further, right? Because some places, when you listen in, perhaps they're not ready, right? And it's important to ask permission. And so for me, that was a lot of times through, just embodied listening, really getting that sense, really paying attention with it to nature, but then also my own inner nature. And depending on the place and the interaction and the permission, then it became about, okay, how can I perhaps make an offering in some way to this place? And I think that largely depended on what the place felt like it was saying and needed. In some places it was maybe a simple poem, maybe it was an apology. It really all just depended on what was happening and how that place was speaking to me. Sometimes it was as simple as really needing to pick up trash, even, doing that kind of work. And of course, being with places, embodied witnessing. In some places, I will admit, I had perhaps an agenda to go in or thoughts of wanting to do something for the place. And to my surprise, in many cases, the place just simply needed a witness. And that was what I did in a lot of cases. In times where something else felt like it was emerging, I would allow spontaneous acts of honoring to also come through, whether that be through land art, found poetry, or even just doing some watercolor painting with river water itself. And so, yeah, just beautiful ways to offer and honor the land. And as you can see there's some pictures that I included. I will say that, the Tabakabi, Pikes Peak, there's even some play involved, right? Building snowmen. So quite interesting. And, I will say that for me, as I engaged with each place, now I'm at this point where I'm in this reflection period, and I'm trying to make sense of it all. And I feel like the easiest way for me to do that is to think about each place, to think about the place in terms of the land, the base, and then the warrior, which is myself. And so for the next few slides, I'm just going to curate. I tried to actually find a photo that I had taken throughout my pilgrimage that really spoke to the heart of the land, the base, and the warrior. And so I will curate a few of those for you all. For Carson. And again, this is the first place that I visited. This was where I had served most of my time as a first sergeant, so as a senior enlisted soldier. And I spent, as I went back on my pilgrimage, so much time with the mountain, Tavakavi, Sun Mountain, or as we like to call it, Pikes Peak. And such a divine, sacred, strong place to interact with. Tavakavi, it calls to you miles before you can even get into the city of Colorado Springs. And so it was really amazing to be with this particular mountain for days, traveling even to the top. And again, you saw there was snow on top of the mountain, right? So here I am sort of being in this quite magically mystical environment, feeling like I'm not exactly on Earth and not quite in the heavens, somewhere in between, above the clouds. Such diversity within the mountains, such magic. And that was lovely to really set me up for the place field engagement with Fort Carson itself. Fort Carson being the first military base that I was going to interact with on my pilgrimage. I could see some interesting things coming in as I drove around and engaged with the memorial sites, parade fields, and I really captured this feeling of this echo, this legacy of tradition and warrior ethos that felt like it just rang out from the base. Clearly, this base has been shaped by those echoes and legacies. Of course, Kit Carson being one of them, and I think that this engagement quickly had me thinking about some of the shadows of our military, of course. Right? We know that Fort Carson is considered to be a Western legend, but also someone who has been involved in, the long walk of the Navajo. And so there's certainly both ends here within this particular legend that is really, you can see all throughout Fort Carson. And I would just say for me as a warrior being here at this particular location, if I could sum up my feeling in a word of just being here, ultimately, I would say it felt like home. Colorado for me, I spent a few years there, and some of my most fondest memories are with my kids, being a father in this location. And so, Fort Carson was certainly a special place for me, certainly a place of strength, but also a place to start considering what are my ethos now? Again, going back to that question of what am I a warrior for? As I entered the base, one of the mottos that they give you is they say steadfast and loyal. And I instantly was like, steadfast and loyal for what? And so it's great to be able to question that now and to feel, it's like, what am I steadfast and loyal for now? Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri was my next stop that I had went to. And this place was really something special, quite different from the landscape of Fort Carson. Obviously, the just tremendous amount of growth and vegetation within that land is it's so green. There's no wonder why they call Fort Leonard Wood Fort Lost in the Woods. And as I made my entrance, I came down through the Ozark area, which is also sometimes called the Missouri Dragon. And I found my way really being engaged. I found my way into Hahatonka, which is a spring that sits sort of towards the southern end, and was really, really engaged with Hahatonka, which, Osage means, big smiles or big laughs. And my goodness, there's so many stories within this particular place. One of them for me that jumped out was, if you go to Hahatonka, you'll find an actual castle that's somehow built in there. And so this castle tells this interesting story of a Kansas City businessman who decided in the early 1900s that was going to build on that land, taking rock out of a nearby quarry and building this castle. And it's an interesting bit of lore to come in contact with because, you know, this castle was never quite successful in being completed. Well, it got complete, but somehow it caught on fire in the 1940s. And then again in the 1970s. And it's interesting to sort of read into that story and to consider how, you know, important it is to really just think about asking permission again, like, you know, from the land, you know, is this the place where the land wants us to be? Sometimes the land can have ways of letting us know. And so for me, engaging with Hahatanka was both insightful. I learned quite a bit. I enjoyed going into some of the lore, but also, you know, it gave me a wonderful entryway into into Fort Leonard Wood. And, you know, Fort Leonard Wood for me that was where I went to basic training. So, my goodness, the land here felt so different, right? It's carved out, it's flat, and it's ready to hold its troops. And that's, you know, that's what I felt there. The land is sort of shaped to hold the warrior across the spectrum of conflicts. You know, Fort Leonard Wood was established in 1941, and that place was essentially stood up to hold the troops that were preparing for war, for World War II. And you know, this very field, which was established in 1941, Gammon Field, was the same field that I graduated on when I went to basic training. And so, you know, for me to be back here at this location as a warrior, I would say that there was some reclamation in terms of, you know, I was no longer this person who, you know, had to really be this member of a team, right? But yet I could also see myself more and more on an individual level, which was really, really wonderful. So I spent a couple of days here at Gammon Field, really just making ceremony and sketching and just enjoying and being in gratitude for being an individual again. Then I ventured down into Fort Campbell in Clarksville, and this particular area, I would say if I could sum it up in a word, it would be grief. A little bit of a harder place to really situate myself with. You know, I spent time with Dunbar Cave, which is sort of central in the town of Clarksville. It sits on about 144 acres of land, not very much, but yet it tells a powerful story. You know, I would call the land, you know, the land really is a sanctuary. It's been a sanctuary for you know, the indigenous community. It's been a sanctuary for Union soldiers and even for slaves who were fleeing from the South. And so for me, it felt really, really important to make, you know, a special honoring here and to spend a lot of time with Dunbar Cave. Of course, going into the military base for me, this particular base held a lot of memories for me. I served there between 2012, 2016, and I served in this 5th Special Forces Group as an intelligence sergeant, which, you know, for us, unfortunately, we had lost a lot of folks during the time when I was there. And there's a field that sits right across from the unit that I was in, which I really spent most of my time with while on the base. And they call it Gabriel Field. And this particular base, you know, I would say, or this particular field, sort of interesting to see how the land is shaped into the warrior. Like there's lots of trees, there's lots of magnolia trees that are planted, and each tree is planted in honor of the fallen soldier. And so as you can see there, even in the picture, there's a couple of younger trees, right? And so it's interesting to sit with how they, in this particular location, it feels like the trees have sort of a responsibility to stand tall, right, and honor. And so for me, I sat with Gabriel Field, and I felt the need to really create a poem when I was there. And I guess I'll go ahead and recite it for you if that's okay. uh, Standing at attention, we grow in solidarity, present for duty, towering with honor. Calm as the grass beneath us, we were born for this day. Our instructions are clear. We shall not tremble. We shall not cry for thirst. We shall not crack, nor shall we fold under pressure. No matter the weather, no matter the season, no matter the feeling, no reason can break our ranks. Dressed right and covered down, we are ready for inspection. A cohort of green, a brotherhood of locked limbs. We, the vigil for the fallen, the magnolias of Gabriel Field. Yeah. Again, this place for me, in a word, there was a lot of emotion, grief. And I will say, as I made my exit, I ended up somehow finding the Trail of Tears on the way. And, here I am now, all of a sudden having my world, my military world, my personal world collide with the indigenous world that sort of was happening underneath it all, right? You had between the 1830s and 50s, this indigenous removal of these 5 tribal nations from the southeast of our country, and removed from that area and forced to walk all the way to Oklahoma, right? This was something that certainly could not be ignored, because Oklahoma was where I was going to next. And so here I am traveling down this road in I-40 and really feeling this wound that has happened, so early within our nation. And it's still very present. You're on the highway, you're crossing these boundary lines, these markers, now entering Choctaw Nation, now entering Seminole Nation, now entering, so it's just, you're if you're noticing, you can feel it. The road is speaking to you as well. And so as I'm at Fort Sill engaging, I will say one of the more healing times that I had was being in the Wichita Mountains and being with the 600 plus roaming American bison that are out there. And that for me, just gave me exactly this boost that I felt like I needed at this particular stretch in the journey. And for me, I would say that the lesson there, the land was really like just be present with what is. There's very something magical that happens within you if you just observe a bison for a few hours. And I think that really helped me to go into Fort Sill and to do a little bit of squatching around that area. And I will say that in terms of the land there, it felt like there's a place called Medicine Bluff, which actually, you can see in the picture there. There's a bit of lore surrounding that as well. That's the place where Geronimo had jumped off as he's running from captivity, right? And Medicine Creek was a really important place to the Wichita tribes that were there, but there was medicine within that creek, and so it's interesting how that place sits right within the base. And so for this particular part of my pilgrimage journey, I actually was on the base most of the time. I actually slept and camped on Fort Sill. And I felt like for me, if I could sum up my own feeling in a word there, being at Fort Sill, it would be simply reflective. For me, that was a place where I had spent my time as a drill sergeant. So, that was where I was at I would say my warrior peak, being the elder warrior, the trainer of new warriors. And so being there and being, just able to reflect on that was helpful. And not only thinking about, my evolution as a warrior, but also the sacrifices that were made for me to be on that journey. And I will admit a lot of it came down to reflecting on my relationship with my family, and being in certain positions, not necessarily having the time or maybe sometimes the energy to engage with family. Being at this place, it really allowed me to reflect on how much time that I didn't spend with my family. And I think it gave me much more gratitude and appreciation, again, for where I'm at right now and at this point in my life. The next location, Fort Cavazos, which I'll just say, for here, this place, the land, I began to see the land really as an artist at this point. The land is this it's an artist. She's a canvas, and a curator in some ways. It's these colors, these beautiful, bright markings. By the time I got to Fort Cavazos, I honestly felt like I wasn't doing much land art and creation myself. I was simply being a witness to the beauty of the land. But then being on Fort Cavazos, like that particular place field was significant to me just because that was where I'd earned my stripes and became a leader within the military. And one of the stories that I often tell within, it was in my book as well, but there's a PT field, Kaichnik PT field, where I spent many of mornings trying to lead PT and fumbling my way through, feeling somewhat not so confident, but trying to project an air of confidence and leading others. And so this particular land was really, for me, it's signaling, this ability to sort of shape leaders and build leaders in a way. I also ventured over to a memorial park, which, for me, started to awaken some other things. I will say that one of the themes that I had noticed throughout the military bases that I had visited was that there's a lot of talk about sacrifice, right? And within this particular place that I had visited, was certainly seeing how, for me, warriors are groomed for the sacrifice on, America's altar of freedom to protect the way of life in a way. And so as I was engaging and reading just certain scriptures, certain passages that were present. I mean, it was certainly quite powerful to sit with and realize, just how much the warriors really sort of, encouraged to be prepared to make that sacrifice. And you can see even at the top of the memorial, it's sort of hard to read in the small letters, but it says, "Brave rifles, veterans, you have been baptized in fire and blood and come out steel." And so, there's a lot of interesting sort of just these words, these strong emotional, encouragement to really embody this machine-like state and be ready to lay down life, right? And then I'll say, at the end, as I circle back around to Fort Bliss, which is my current home, my current location, it felt good to really come back this way after being 40 plus days on the road. And one of the places that I love to go to here is Waco Tanks, which feels absolutely magical. And Waco Tanks for me is a place that, it's been supporting life for over 10,000 years. And what's interesting is that the rock formations they have these depressions within them. So every time it rains, they hold water for a substantial amount of time, which attracts life. And we know that it doesn't rain very much here down in this particular region of El Paso. And so really, the so remarkable to see how the land holds water, but also memory. As I spend time here, one of the things that happens is it breaks me away from the outside world and allows me to really tap into this ancestral sort of feeling of, my own ancient being, walking around and just simply really everything starts to activate and starts to become alive a little bit more. My sense of sight, my sense of hearing, all of these things start to really turn on, which is really magical and wonderful. And I'm going to pause here because I see, Liz, your hand is up.
Hey, Mike, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to just acknowledge it's almost 10, we're almost on the hour. So if we are
Yeah.
recording this for those of you who are not able to stay on beyond the hour, just wanted to point that out, and we will share the recording with everyone who registered. So
Yeah. And I'll just say that was really my last slide anyway. So, but again, it's being on the pilgrimage journey. For me, it's been this opportunity to ask myself, warrior for what? And I will say now that I'm home and in reflection, it feels what's alive in me right now is that I certainly need to be a warrior for my family, for interconnectedness, for vision and creativity. And really for encouraging the inner wildness to come out. And so thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time, and I will pass it back over to you, Liz.
thank you. Sorry about that, Mike. I didn't realize you were just about ready to end. Um, that was really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I just wanted to offer if anyone has any questions or reflections for Mike.
Or maybe something that touched you from this. I realize we haven't had time to process. It was such a beautiful talk. Mike, you can
Andrea, you just muted again.
that's fine. I just wanted to say it's a lot to take in. It was an incredibly rich and layered journey. So have a feeling or some image or something that might have touched you that you might want to share in the chat or out loud. Cynthia.
Hi. Wow. I was crying, I mean, you really touched some deep places. What kept coming up for me for some reason is, and it might have started when you said something about when you were at Fort Carlson about steadfast and loyal, about how our warriors, our men and women in the military right now how are they going to deal with orders that are illegal? And you as an individual now, looking back at this amazing career in our military where you even taught our warriors, how much how much do you train them to understand that they do not have to obey an illegal order? Are they prepared? Are any of them prepared to do this now?
Wow, that's such a good question. And a difficult question, Cynthia. I will say, it's within the oath, right? You're saying you're going to obey the orders of the president and the officers appointed over you, and sometimes in the chaotic world that we live in, right, these orders can change, the people can change, and that's challenging. And I think for me, one of the things I'll say that I do encourage now as a veteran, and something I put in my book is that there needs to be a constant azimuth check within yourself, right? And that's okay. It's okay to have that. I think as humans, we should always be exploring our axiology, our our own value system, and at the end of the day, that's for every individual to decide, whether or not they're going to obey certain orders or perhaps consider, another career choice or something like that. I would hope that, because I do think our nation does need guardians, right? Because we do need our warriors to defend our nation, but yet also we live in a very tumultuous time where people are having to make very tough choices. And I would say, if anything, for our warriors, I always encourage them, hey, ask yourself, go inward, do introspection, ask if this is something that I can live with at the end of the day. And if not, perhaps it is time to find another option. Or, if they can live with the choices they make, then maybe it's about staying in and trying to reshape in some way, trying to transmute those experiences and reshape them. I always thought, and I'll just end on this note, for me, that one of the reasons why I continued to stay in and do what I did was, I wanted to, as a senior leader, be able to change the culture a little bit, or perhaps push back in a way, or at least make us question what it is we're doing and why, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Um, you mentioned your book a few times, and I was going to ask you,
Oh,
and
yeah.
somebody just put in the chat, what is the name of your book and where might we be able to find that? Can I find that on a link?
Yeah, it's called Guardian Rising Meditation for the Future Warrior. And it is actually, you can find, I'll put a link here
Okay,
while we continue to talk.
great.
And I'm certainly open to any more questions if anyone has any.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? I see that Christy wrote, so moved by your journey and story as an act of beauty. I feel connected to these places and their stories through what you have offered. Thank you. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy.
Would anyone else like to share? Marilyn shared, reminded me of the Shambhala warriors and how we can be warriors for peace, inclusiveness, kindness, and the highest good for all. I really like your emphasis on self-reflection, Mike. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah, thank you,
Marilyn.
Marilyn.
I have a question.
Jennifer,
Hi.
hi.
Mike, I'm wondering if you've had time yet to start envisioning your next series of visual art out of this journey that you've been on.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm doing right now as I reflect on this pilgrimage is it's a style or an approach of art called El Duende process painting. And so every week for the last 6 weeks, I have gone back into my pilgrimage and I've just sat with one place at a time. So, for example, like this last week, I read all of my writing from Fort Cavazos and all of the sketches. I reviewed all of my photos. And then at the end of the week, what I do is I actually, I go into the art studio and I paint based on all of the reflections. And so El Duende is interesting because the idea is that I stick with one canvas and I just layer paintings on top of that same canvas over and over again and allow it to transform. And so that's been really helpful for me. And I do look forward to next year, actually, when my dissertation is complete. There will be an art show, hopefully in Santa Fe, where I'll have some of this work. Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer.
I have a question. I know, Mike, you and I had talked a little bit about the, the sort of communication with the natural world around us and how, these things like the Sasquatch was showing up for you and, everywhere you went. And I just wondered if you had any wisdom or offering to share those of us who do, spend time in place or wounded place or just any place of like how we might open up our world to having those conversations with the world around us.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. I would say, if anything, the world is full of allies, whether they're earthly, whether they're mythical. And I just, yeah, I feel like it's really my simplest approach is just to notice and to notice you're noticing, and anything that crosses your path, right? Like there's a lesson there. And yeah, it's just simply noticing it all and sitting with it. For me, the allies were, yeah, was definitely Sasquatch. And to my surprise, I will say that the world of the fairy actually made an appearance at a couple of my locations, and I'd be out somewhere in the wilderness, and there was other artists who were curating, these little fairy homes and things, and just so it was really magical to sit with, these lessons that they were presenting me as well about being playful and communal. So yeah, there's so much out there.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share? Mike, just quickly, do your dreams, do you remember dreams? And I've felt that dreams also are another layer of signs, symbols, and connection to place and to all the non-human elements. Did that play any role?
Yes, Andrea, thank you for that one. Because again, I'm trying to find a way to really capture the experience. There's so many layers to this, but before I had gone out on my pilgrimage for about 6 months, I was taking dream tending with Dr. Stephen Eisenstadt, and so dream was very much a part of this journey as well, and really tracking them every night. And I will say that there was some interesting experiences that were happening with dream as well. One of them being, I had a dream before I even started the pilgrimage, and it was a place that had showed up. It was a building, and it had a big dome shape on the top of it. I remember the next day, it was May 23rd, and I had sketched the building out after I woke up, and lo and behold, on my pilgrimage on June 23rd, I'd made my pilgrimage home. And in my hometown, as I'm just sort of walking around and being with my home place, I turned this corner, and it was on the University of Illinois campus, actually, where I was, and there's the building with the dome. And that was really just a powerful example for me of how places come through in dream. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Mike. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so great to share that and to have these extra kind of openings and tools to think about how we have relationship.
Mhm.
If there are anyone else who would like to share at this moment? If not, I would maybe give it back to you, Mike. Liz, I don't know if you want to close us out. If not, Mike, I wondered if there's anything else like to kind of wrap and close this beautiful space that you'd like to share, maybe from even the experience of sharing this journey with all of us today.
I would just say I am so grateful to have this particular community. Again, we know that right now there's things happening in the world all around. There's so many places of hardship, and so it's really inspiring for me to be here in community with you all, and to see folks who are interested in being with spaces in a different way, and it's so needed, right? We clearly know that it feels like certain systems might be collapsing, certain ways, certain old ways might be collapsing, but that's okay because it gives us room for new ways to right? To bring in new ways into the world. And so I think that that's important to remember is the fact that, you know, just because one thing might be ending, right? Like something else can be born. And that's all I want to say. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I think just reflecting on what you just said about being in this community, I just want to share with everyone here who's attending live, and I know some of you are already part of our Radical Joy community, but we really love to hear from you, and I'll put my email address in the chat, and we'd love to be building more community and having more online events going forward. Our Earth Exchange Cafe is going to go on another little mini hiatus because I'm unexpectedly in the middle of a move, and we just have me as the full-time, or not even full-time, I'm very, very part-time executive director. I still have my day job. But we really, really want to continue with these online events where we can connect. We are talking about doing some grief circles and just other opportunities, maybe some practices that we can do to help ground our nervous systems during this time. I know Christy, who's on here today, who's also a former board member, former president of Radical Joy. You know, we have talked about doing some things like that as well. And so yeah, we just really want to encourage you to reach out and just stay connected. And if you're not already on our email sign up list, I'll also put that in the chat. Otherwise, maybe as we close out, if you feel compelled, maybe just saying a word or two or a few words in thanks to Mike for sharing his work with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really feel inspired for what's to come because of the work someone like yourself is doing in the world.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Cynthia.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm looking forward to reading your book, and maybe we'll have a book club. Or
Hey, there we go.
more
Wonderful
questions
idea.
later. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Thank you, everyone. It's so awesome to be in community with everyone here.
Thank you.
Aloha,
Take care.
everyone. As we say in Hawaii, hui ho. We'll see you again till we see you again.
And
Liz.
I can't quickly find the email sign up, but you can just send an email to me that I just put my email address in the chat. Elizabeth, Lizabeth @radicaljoy.org. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, band
Liz.
members. Be well, everyone.